Now, before we continue our coverage, I want to make it very clear that right now we are only going to report the facts that are coming in, and we are not going to speculate about the means or the motives of these two men. The fact is that we don't know why these two men did what they did, whether or not it was an isolated attack or part of a bigger network. We don't know what current connections these men have to the Republic of Chechnya, so we want to be very careful in describing these men. Now, that being said, the chaos playing out in Boston will undoubtedly have international repercussions. For a look at the bigger picture of these events, I'm joined now by Walid Faris. He's an advisor to Anti-Terrorism Caucus for the U.S. Congress. Walid, a lot of media attention quickly began around this event, obviously this morning and last night. They began calling the suspects on Monday and saying that this was an act of terror and after the bombings actually happened at the Boston Marathon. President Obama on Monday, though, was very hesitant at first to call this such an attack. Now, how do you classify something as a terror attack? Is it method? Is it victims? Is it the perpetrator? Or is it some combination of these things?
It is absolutely a combination of all of the things that you have mentioned, but primarily we look at victims, the civilian victims first, victims in general. That is outside the norms of regular conflict and war, and that is conducted with extreme violence and collective punishment versus assassination, for example, which is one target. But in this case, now we are beyond that. And you're right to say that President Obama was very careful. He was advised not to go too fast, but the facts were going very fast in the sense 2 bombs have exploded, people were killed, hundreds were injured, and then more important, the perpetrators, now the terrorists, have engaged in firefight with law enforcement. So it has all the hallmarks of a team, in this case 2 brothers who have planned this terror act and planned probably another wave, but they were they were shocked by the fact that their pictures were aired, and therefore they fled. They clashed with law enforcement. 1 was killed, and now we see the end of the drama unfolding in front of our eyes in Boston.
Now, these men are obviously from Eastern Europe. Tamerlad was born in Russia. Johar was born in Kyrgyzstan. The family lived in Dagestan in the Russian Federation for numerous years before reportedly leaving the country around 2001 to 2003 and seeking asylum in the U.S. to escape some of the violence there. Now, how has the fact that these 2 men happen to be from Eastern Europe and not the U.S. added to an international aspect of these attacks?
Definitely it's going to add an international aspect for the simple fact that one of them is naturalized, actually 2 of them, and they have links outside the United States. But the new approach now is it doesn't matter what nationality you're coming from. I mean, if they are Chechen, happen to have Russian passports, 1 was born in different republics, they have emigrated, they became U.S. persons, U.S. Citizens. What is important here is what are the motives. And the motives basically is not just the action, the military action, what are the statements, who indoctrinated them. What we're looking at right now is really the videotapes that they have posted. A few hours ago, we have discovered that they have YouTube channels. It has been now sort of downloaded, and there is a study of these YouTube channels, what was the material posted. And the last question is, at the end of the day, these are not ideologues. These are young men who have received this ideology from somewhere. Who has indoctrinated them and when is the question.
And Walid, I need to know this. As soon as the information came in about these men being of the Islamic faith, speculations came in about whether they were doing jihad and whether this was an act of martyrdom. How can we be sure that just because these men are Muslim that the attacks were possibly motivated by their religion, or can we be sure?
Well, if we ask this question, if we are in the Arab and Muslim world, there are Al-Qaeda attacks in Saudi Arabia, the holiest place of Sunni Islam. There are Al-Qaeda attacks in Pakistan. So the Muslim identity alone, of course, is not the measurement. What is measurement are statements made by these individuals or posted by these individuals of commitment not to the religion, not to pray 5 times a day, but to an ideology. And the ideology means that separating people between infidels and others, establishing the caliphate, the usual Salafi jihadi approach, which is well known in the Arab world, and unfortunately not well clarified here in the West in general terms.
Now, Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov commented that on the suspects earlier today. I want you to take a listen to this.
Okay.
We don't know anything about the Tsarnaev brothers. They never lived in Chechnya. The media is reporting that they grew up and went to school in America, so the problem is with their upbringing there. We regret that this deadly tragedy took place, as we know better than anybody about these things, and we offer our condolences.
So, Waleed, on one hand, he's offering his condolences, but on the other, he is blaming the suspects' American upbringing for their alleged actions, as opposed to their backgrounds outside of the U.S. What are your thoughts on this?
Look, there's a lot of chaos out there. American upbringing, basically going to school in America, does not create jihadists. I wouldn't even say Russian upbringing. I would say that we have to be very specific. The fact that they are Chechen or Georgian or Dagestanis or Russians from the greater Russian state has nothing to do. It's what kind of ideology you were recruited from. And that is the question, to see what kind of internet resources they had, who did they meet. And it's not just about those Chechens. We had American-born Anglos, we had Asians, we had African Americans. We have now, we see in Mali, in other places, a variety of ethnicities and a variety of sectarian affiliation. What brings together all these elements, if they are terrorists, is an ideology, is Salafi jihadism.
Well, let's talk about the aspect of terrorists. Terrorists are often described as very religious, coming from very impoverished backgrounds. These young men are both well-educated, they have successes in athletics, and by all means, they have a middle-class background. If indeed these brothers are guilty of this crime, how does this complicate the way that we view terrorists?
I think we have a very primitive view of terrorism. Who said that all terrorists are coming from lower classes, from people who are poor and what have you? We saw, for example, that there's a very large middle class, 45 medical doctors who make a lot of money, probably more than you and me combined, in Great Britain have been arrested while backing jihadi activities, terrorist activities. We see that there are donors in the Gulf, in the Arabian Gulf, very rich donors. They are funding that activity. And of course they are poor. So it's not a question of social classes. It's a question of who belong to this one ideology, rich, middle class, or poor.
Thank you for sharing your insight. Waleed Faris, advisor to the Anti-Terrorism Caucus for the U.S. Congress.
Thank you for having me.